Hi guys, as you can see, there is a new developer note slash balance patch, which is very different. And before I even get into that, I want to apologize because I am a little bit sick right now. Uh, if I cough or sneeze or anything like that, I apologize. But with that, let's get into the balance patch, as this is one of the most different ones or most different balance patches we've ever actually seen. Now, first and foremost, there are two adjustments to heroes receiving new exclusive equipments. However, in addition to this, we are also getting two characters who are having their kits changed. Now, first and foremost, we have Fenris, and then we have new Kid Aiden. Now, admittedly, this is, from what I understand, the first time that we've ever had this few balance patch characters in an update. However, they did still say that they will be continuing with the update to the patch on 6.5. I'm trying to find exactly where they say that, but I did read that somewhere. Oh yeah, here it is. Please note that the balance patch adjustment scheduled for 6.5 will still proceed as planned, but they decided to balance or buff a few characters prior to this date. Now, again, in terms of the characters, let's start with Fenris. So he's a Covenant 5-star. He's if I'm not mistaken, a Grass Ranger. And what they've changed for him is that now when you have his S3, you increase the combat readiness of the ally in the back by 50%. Now, this is obviously nice for whatever purpose. I don't think this affects really anything in terms of his gameplay from like the PvE side. So like before I even, talk about the PvP side, one of the things that I think is really important about these patch notes is to consider whether or not this actually affects or bricks them or ruins them in PvE. And from what I understand, though there are some cases where you can use Fenris, this is not that big a deal. Furthermore, based on the wording of this, as it says, increases the combat readiness of the ally in the back row by 50%. And from what I am reading, it doesn't include the fact that, or it doesn't include specific dialogue that says that it can't include themselves. In theory, you could give it to yourself and maybe use some other combat readiness pushing artifact to kind of, I guess prolong or, increase his total push and give him the turn quicker. In addition to this, we have a 4-star Moonlight update for new Kid Aiden. Now, her changes are a bit more, I guess they're a bit more involved, but just to kind of explain what's being changed, formally, or I guess just conceptually, new Kid Aiden is supposed to fixate on this whole injury concept or idea. However, what they're now changing her to be is that instead of having or guaranteeing that her S1 will attack all enemies when it's on her turn, they're now changing that to be a soul burn. And rather now, because they got rid of the AoE from S1, they've now added the effect that when the caster is granted vigor, a successful attack will inflict additional damage equivalent to 50% of injuries inflicted on the target, which is something that you have probably seen on someone like Death Dealer Ray or even Ilanov. Now, moving along, they also did buff the way that this character works with not only an increase to the combat readiness that she gains by 10% if she has vigor, but in addition to this, it also says that she increases her evasion by 50%, and when successfully evading, grants vigor to the caster for 1 turn and counterattacks. Now, that said, counterattacks can only be activated 1 turn. However, something, or rather a common complaint, I believe, about this new Kid Aiden character is that it didn't feel like she had quite enough oomph or survivability the same way that her alternative or her peer Savior Aiden had. And for a lot of players, I think when they saw this new Kid Aiden character, not only was the prospect of trying to injure a target like enough while surviving very difficult, like just in general, there weren't even that many scenarios where you could even justify wanting to injure someone as opposed to just one-shotting them. Now, again, this isn't to say that Savior Aiden is, much infinitely more meta and better than her, as I believe both have kind of fallen off in the meta because of characters like Shaltir and because of characters like I don't know, New Moon Luna, basically anyone that steals passives or removes the effect from these characters. But as a result, I do think that these changes are quite impactful or quite nice for her. And the final change that they've actually they've added is they reduced the cooldown of her S3 by 1 turn. Now they did reduce the amount of souls that she gains because of it. However, I do think that a 20% increase to her vigor means that she is guaranteed to likely take a turn after 4 or obviously a total of 5 turns if she has vigor granted to herself. But I think the biggest changes to her kit come from the fact that she now has a bit more survivability with counterattacking. Maybe this means that people will now run her on lifesteal. And in addition to this, I do believe that being able to choose when she AoEs or not, or with her S1, can be quite helpful, as sometimes having an AoE, an uncontrollable AoE, is bad, as it opens you up to activating things like Elbrus, activating things like Mort, and not it's not a very enjoyable or appreciable time. Now, I do also want to say that based on, or depending on the scaling of this this added successful attack inflicting additional damage based on injury, this could also be very big, as prior to this, the way that Aiden worked, or New Kid Aiden worked, was that she would use S3, kind of injure someone, and after that's done, she kind of falls off. However, if you do pair her perhaps now with other injury characters, maybe something like an injury Harsetti or an Alencia, characters like this, you could we could see some good value pairing the two together, especially since obviously, like, if you're running into a super heavy tanky team, one of the things that you'd want to have is a injury or a tank buster character if you don't feel that you can cleave or naturally outscale them in terms of damage. And with that, there's a chance that with the 50% evasion, which then would probably turn into 70, assuming you run something like Shepherd on New Kid Aiden, it does feel like this could be a very interesting concept for a character and a buff, which I'm honestly a fan of. Now, to be clear, they also, or I don't believe they've announced specifically what they're teasing for their exclusive equipment, but just from the balance patch alone, I think Fenris is interesting because he obviously caters to more cleave characters, and whether he's pushing himself, again, because there's no specific text that says he can't, but whether it's himself or another ally, I think that this 50% combat readiness push is pretty interesting. However, in terms of New Kid Aiden, I believe that Aiden is kind of, kind of in a weird spot, just because, again, when it comes to injury characters, they already have, like, most of them have something in their kit that provide an insane amount of value to the team. And if it's not you pre-banning or banning them or post-banning them, or avoiding fighting them entirely, it feels like it's not that great of an answer, or it feels like it's not that great of an idea to engage in some of these characters. Like, I've seen people that will post-ban someone like Ilanov, pre-ban Ilanov, things like this, rather than have to deal with them. Same thing, there are other characters that are good at dealing with characters like Bride Senya, or even some of these other big tank characters, outside of obviously just cleaving them. And with that, I think that Aiden may have a more established role as a slower player tries to use this. Maybe you could use someone like New Kid Aiden alongside like the newly or more recently buffed Adventurer Roz to keep her alive. But ultimately, we'll have to see what the ratios look like. It doesn't look like there's a buff to the damage anywhere that they state. But this is a pretty big change. Maybe she's used more with Death Dealer Ray, and as they're both dark units, maybe this is where you can run someone like ML Peyra alongside them. Who knows? But excuse me. But in any case, guys, that's going to be it. It's a very short patch. Cool, interesting. I'm excited to see what their EEs are, and yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment section. But yeah, that's it for today's video. Thanks again for watching. See you all next time. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night.